100 people in this room, each living 100 unique experiences. Yet there are a few things we all have in common. We will all experience happiness, sadness, joy, and sorrow. It is also a certainty that we will all experience pain at some point in our lives. Yet for something so uniting and non-discriminating, very few of us have a good understanding of this common human experience. Early in my career, just a year out from graduating physical therapy school, I had a patient who I will never forget. She was newly admitted to the facility I was working at with a host of diagnoses, including chronic low back pain. I asked her one of the standard questions, what is your pain, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain you could imagine. Well, her pain was a 15 out of 10 right that minute. Yet she was not in distress, and she was telling me this information as plainly as if she was reading the weather report. Additionally, her most recent imaging scans could not find any definitive source of her pain. In my own naivety, I assumed she must be lying. I told her if her pain was truly a 15 out of 10 right that minute, then we should go to the emergency room. Would she like me to call her an ambulance? She said no, and somehow also managed to not kick me out of the room. As my career progressed, I encountered many more people like this woman, and I was constantly feeling as if I was missing some part of the picture. Why did some of my patients deal with pain better than others? Why did pathology and imaging often not align with how my patients presented to the clinic? Why was pain not a more uniform experience? With these questions in mind, I started reading and researching, attending classes in postgraduate education, and what I learned was fascinating, and I believe should be part of the user manual to being a human being, if such a thing existed. The basis of what I learned is that pain is incredibly complex, and it encompasses all of your bodily systems, as well as societal and contextual factors. And most importantly, pain is an output of your brain. So is that to say that it's all in your head? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Pain is inherently a subjective experience, and therefore our individual pain experiences are all unique. But because pain stems from the brain, we also have an incredible ability to provide context to our pain experience and ultimately gain some control over how we feel. One of the first things to understand about pain is that it is a good thing. The purpose of pain is to protect you. In fact, there's a condition where people are born without the ability to sense pain, and they typically don't live past adolescence because they're unable to detect illness or injury. The second thing to understand about pain is the actual definition. Pain is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage or described in terms of such damage. Pain is a sensation, but we do not have nerves that uniquely sense pain. What we have are nociceptors. Nociceptors are nerve endings that sense things like pressure, temperature, and chemical changes. Sometimes we call these nociceptors danger neurons. Now, these danger neurons are constantly sending information to your brain, such as the pressure of your body against the chair or the cold winter air against your cheeks. Simultaneously, your brain is also receiving information from your other organs and systems, as well as the outside world. Messages from your internal system may be things like your blood sugar is a little low, or I feel sad today. And messages from the outside world might be how supportive your family and friends are to your experience, or things like, gosh, I can't afford to be sick right now because I don't have paid sick leave at my job. So your brain then synthesizes all of this information and decides what to do with it. If your brain determines there's enough evidence to convey a threat, then one potential outcome is pain. Other times, your brain may receive nociception danger signals but all of the internal and the external messages are not contributing sufficiently to convey a threat. And in those situations, you will not have pain because there's no need for protection. So this is part of the reason why pain may be different from moment to moment and person to person. For example, we know that damage or degeneration present on imaging cannot predict what level of pain a person has. In fact, one study found that upwards of 90% of people over the age of 60 have spinal disc degeneration present on imaging. Although, of course, not 90% of people in that demographic have back pain. So how could that be? Well, because we know that nociception, or again, information from your tissues alone, is not sufficient to generate pain, because ultimately our brain decides. So to bring it back to my patient, she had had recent imaging, but there were no changes or signs of something serious going on, yet her pain persisted. For her, the information she was receiving from her tissues, taken in context of the situation, meant her brain perceived a threat. It was like there was a giant grizzly bear in the room and her brain needed to protect her. This information is so powerful because it really expands our view of pain management. If you go to the doctor today for pain of any kind, which is, of course, one of the most common reasons to seek medical care, you will likely be provided a host of options aimed at the tissue level. I'm talking about medications, injections, procedures, and therapies. Now, all of these are certainly valuable and often effective options, but what if we also addressed the psychological, the emotional, societal, and cultural factors? What power could we have over our pain then? So I've described how pain is a sensory experience, but it's also emotional. This serves a few purposes. First, it serves to enhance our memory. It also makes us more empathetic to others, and it strengthens our social connections. This relationship has its trade-offs, however. For example, we know that anxiety about pain and pain-related fear are both created in response to pain, but they can also trigger, maintain, or exacerbate pain. Now, but wait a minute, wouldn't it be normal to have pain or fear and anxiety about pain? Well, to a certain degree, yes. Fear of acute pain is adaptive, and it helps us escape potentially dangerous situations. However, fear in the setting of chronic pain is often counterproductive because the acute threat has resolved. Now, these mechanisms of pain processing and pain management are the same, whether we're discussing acute pain, like stubbing your toe, or chronic pain like my patient I had so many years ago. However, when it comes to chronic pain, there are additional physiological factors and compensations that sometimes contribute to sustained symptoms. With chronic pain, which is typically described as pain that persists beyond the expected window of tissue healing, there are observable changes within the spinal cord and the brain that result in sensitization to that nociceptive danger information. In this sensitized state, the result is that the radio station is turned up just a little louder than normal. With time, it becomes harder for your brain to filter out those danger signals, and eventually the only song you can hear is pain. So how do we manage pain once these changes occur and symptoms become chronic? These individuals have likely already tried a slew of modalities aimed at the biological or the tissue level, because that's what our medical system does best. But again, what kind of success could we have if we expanded our view to address the psychological and societal factors that also contribute to pain? For example, we've already described how fear and anxiety are normal reactions to pain. The exception is when tissues have healed and yet pain persists. Fear and anxiety in this chronic setting continue to increase the perceived threat level in the brain despite the absence of injury. Perhaps that was part of the issue with my patient from many years ago. She had just been admitted to a new facility. She was away from her home and all of her possessions. That would likely be a really scary situation for just about anyone. This persistent fear and anxiety can then transform into depression, catastrophizing, and anger, which again, all lead to greater pain experience. Addressing these factors may seem tangentially related to a person living with chronic pain, but decreasing the threat level in the brain in all areas will result in decreased symptoms. Another way to turn down the threat level in the brain is through social connection. For example, there are studies that suggest that people who are in securely attached relationships have some resilience from chronic pain. To again bring it back to my patient, would her pain have been better controlled that day if she had had a family member or a friend present with her? One of the most powerful tools for people living with chronic pain is education. Specifically, unlearning our typical understanding of pain, which is that if we're having it, then we must be having tissue damage, and that tissue damage is a threat, to instead understand how these sensations are processed in the brain and what factors contribute to persistent symptoms. One study found that patients with chronic musculoskeletal pain who are misinformed about the origins of their pain demonstrate lower pain tolerance, more catastrophic thoughts, and less adaptive coping strategies. We have evidence that learning about pain physiology helps to decrease the threat level of pain, and it is effective when compared to current standards of care, including some commonly prescribed pain medications that carry serious side effects like dependency and overdose. Now, none of this is to imply that this is a magic cure for chronic pain or that relearning to process pain is easy or even 100% effective. If it were, we would have far fewer than 51 million Americans living with chronic pain. But why is this information so infrequently communicated to patients and generally unknown, despite the fact that the biopsychosocial model that I've described today was first published in 1977? To address some of the root causes of this knowledge gap, and in order to have the greatest impact on societal levels of pain and disability, we need an expansion of pain education across all medical disciplines, as well as payer systems that provide resources for the added effort and time it takes to properly educate patients. In closing, I'd like to describe how I would handle my former patient today, given what I now know about pain. First, I would have sat with her and maybe held her hand. I would have listened and asked her not just about her physical pain, but about her thoughts and feelings regarding this new place. If she was willing, I would have asked her to take a deep breath with me and repeat, "I am okay." And we would have said it as many times as we needed. We would have made an effort to engage with her social network of family and friends to support her during this transition. Over the course of a few visits, we would work to zoom out and take the 30,000-foot view of her life. What else was going on besides her physical pain? We would have worked to understand that anything that was a stressor, as unrelated to her tissues as it may have seemed, could be contributing to her current heightened state. Together, we would work to better control these stressors and help the brain turn down the perceived threat level, resulting in better control over her symptoms. Thank you.